Hey everybody, it's Evan Grant from the Dallas Morning News and SportsDayDFW.com. This is take 9 of this week's YouTube video because I'm basically a train wreck and I have spent about a half an hour shooting different things, realizing that I can't do anything about this lighting issue with my head. My full skull is there, don't worry, but hopefully by the next time we get this done, I'll have a little ring light so we can get rid of the glare. I had issues with a cough, little scratchy thing on my head from the lighting, I guess. Just fidgety in general, and I've stumbled over my words an inordinate number of times. That said, I'm also back here in Dallas for a couple days to kind of commune with nature, reintroduce myself to my wife and the dogs. The cat doesn't even want to know me, and consider a couple of things before I head back to Arizona for the last 3 days of camp. Don't worry, the Rangers are completely covered by Kevin Sherrington, who is out in Arizona finding out what it's like to be a real reporter for a few days. But while I'm back home and working on some other stuff, I've been able to consider a few things that I kind of gleaned from these first 3 weeks of spring training in a very compressed camp in which the Rangers have a lot to do and a lot to get accomplished before I think a really challenging April schedule presents itself. Even with peeling the New York Yankees off the front 4 games of the schedule, Rangers still play 12 of 21 games in April against teams that won 90 games or more last year. Toronto to start the season, Seattle, third week of the year, and then they have a 7-game homestand that's essentially a World Series matchup with 4 against Houston and then 3 against Atlanta. So it'll be a challenging April. This team needs to hit the ground running, can't afford to get itself buried early on. A good tone to the season would only build some momentum for what I think is to come. Maybe not entirely this year, but I think you want to build this year off of last year, and I think you want to take a further step in 2023. So with all that said, and with all the time I've had to kind of contemplate and all the time I've had to redo these videos, I've got here in my hands the list of 5 things that I think were significant developments from the first 3 weeks of spring training that I want to share with you right now. And yes, this is how high-tech we've gotten. I actually wrote notes down. May take away from our unscripted banana-ness, but we'll get through it. So let's start with number 5. Do you want a prospect's name to remember who's not really on the radar right now? All right, I was going to give you Zach Kent, who I saw last year pitch at Class A Hickory, and who pitched probably the best minor league game I've ever seen. 13 strikeouts in 7 innings. Curveball and slider were unhittable. He probably has the best breaking ball in the organization. But listen, that's 2021. Zach is on everybody's radar now. I think he is viewed by most in the organization as one of the top 6 pitchers in the organization, if not higher. I think he will. He's on the verge of pushing himself into that top tier of Ranger pitching prospects. So let's give you somebody else. And how about this one? Tim Brennan. He's a right-hander who last year was the opening day starter at Frisco, but he fractured his forearm when he was hit by a line drive. I think it was 7 games into last year, or 7 starts into last year, and missed most of the rest of the year. Listen, he spent a significant portion of the winter working on his fastball at the Rangers spring training facility, as did Zach Kent, who has added something to his fastball. And both guys came away from this with elevated status within the organization. When I ask people to give me a name for a pick to click this year that's kind of below the radar, Tim Brennan is the name that keeps popping out. He's been in the 94 to 96 mile an hour range with his fastball. He's got some pitching savvy, and he has impressed a lot of people. So he's likely to join the rotation at Frisco, which is going to be star-studded. It wouldn't surprise me, given the fact that he's 25, if the Rangers pushed him even to AAA Round Rock to start the year. But this is a guy that you might file away for a guy who might sneak up on you before the end of the year. The reports have been really good on him. Speaking of that star-studded rotation at Frisco, I think I'm pretty certain at this point in time that this is where Jack Leiter is going to begin his professional career. I can't tell you whether or not he's going to start the opener for the Rough Riders on April 8th. or April 7th, whatever day that is. I'm getting my travel dates and opening dates confused a little bit. But I think the Rangers are in agreement that he's ready to go pitch at Double-A, and those challenges he's up for them. I think the big thing that everybody has seen is the fastball that Jack has is everything it was cracked up to be last year. It's explosive. It rides really well into the strike zone, and it can overwhelm some hitters. The breaking ball is good, but I think he's going to have to work this year on being able to land his slider a little bit more, and certainly learn a feel for the changeup. He's got a good feel for the changeup, but he just didn't have to use it that much in college, and he's going to have to work it into his repertoire more at the professional level. So those are going to be the two big projects, I think, for Jack this spring and summer, I should say. Does that take him out of the mix to make his major league debut in 2023? In 2022, I'm sorry. Listen, I think it does, but I will say this. I put no definites on anything. This guy is a fast learner. He's got a good grasp on how to pitch. He is an advanced pitcher, even for a guy who came out of the SEC and Vanderbilt. And I think that this is a situation also where, some conversation with his dad and his uncle Mark, who also pitched in the big leagues, may also help him as he gets kind of acclimated to professional life. So I think the learning curve for Jack is not going to be quite as big as it would be for even some other college pitchers. But we'll have to wait and see. Go back to the major league roster for a second. Here is what I think the determination is going to be on who ends up being the backup catcher. I know this is something that rivets everybody every year. Who's going to be the backup catcher? Is there any chance you're going to keep three catchers? The answer, I think, to this is no, the Rangers aren't going to keep three catchers. They need all the relief arms they possibly can get, even with an expanded roster. But I do think that what will be the determination on who ends up as the Rangers' backup catcher is not anything per se that Jonah Heim or Jose Trevino do for the Rangers this spring. I think it's going to depend most on what the trade market is for either of these guys. And there is a market out there for both of them. They profile really well as backup catchers. Both are really good framing guys. Jose handles a pitching staff really, really well. Jonah Heim has significant power. Andy's a switch hitter. All those things, they're good attributes for backup catchers. But I think where the Rangers are concerned, what may end up breaking the tie is if they can get a better fringe prospect, I guess it's the best way to say it, for one of the two, I think they're completely fine keeping the other one. Maybe Heim has better raw tools when you factor in the hitting, but they're not going to give short shrift to what Jose does in the clubhouse, what he does with the pitchers, and the amount of time he's invested in that. So I think that may very well be a determination on how the Rangers go with the catching position. And yeah, I do think they're going to trade one of them for two reasons. One, they're going to need a 40-man roster spot to add a couple of the guys that they have on minor league contracts. And two, I think I think it's Mabers Valoria and Matt Watley, both of whom I expect will be catching at AAA Round Rock. I think the Rangers feel either one of them profiles okay as a third catcher, a guy who would be a short-term backup catcher to somebody. And a third thing, I'm spending way too much time on backup catchers, but a third thing here is I've thought a lot about the Jonah Heim switch hitting thing and that you could use him in a platoon situation, or, well, you could give him games in split days that don't work well for Mitch Garver. In other words, play him against some right-handed pitching. Sure, you could do that. But you could also, against left-handers, you could potentially have a platoon situation where you move Garver to first base occasionally. So you have a right-handed hitter at first base. You sit Nathaniel Lowe down, so you take one lefty out of the lineup. You put Trevino behind the plate, and so maybe your splits go up against a right-handed pitcher. A left-handed pitcher. I'm right-brained, left-brained. I'm all over the place, scatterbrained. But maybe you can do that, and that works to your advantage. So that will shut the backup catcher chapter for tonight. To go back to the major league rotation, one thing that I think has come across is the Rangers have been super, super cautious with their starters. Spencer Howard and AJ Alexy are the two guys, both guys vying for the number 5 spot, who have the most innings this year in spring for the Rangers. Both of them have 5. Meanwhile, Oakland's Sean Manaea has 11 2/3. Houston's Justin Verlander has 8 2/3, and Seattle's Robbie Ray has 8 1/3. And the Mariners have 4 guys with 8 or more innings. So what I'm noticing is that if you look around the AOS, there are 18 pitchers in the AOS who have at least 5 innings this spring. 2 of them are Rangers. And so other teams, I think, are pushing their pitchers a little bit harder and a little bit faster. And I don't think the way the Rangers are handling this is a bad thing at all. I think the 2020 experience with Jose Leclerc and Corey Kluber going out after the shortened spring training and the restart after the COVID shutdown has left a mark on this club, and I think they'd rather err on the side of caution. And I think that the addition of the 2 roster spots to fill out a 28-man roster in April makes it much more feasible to go into the season with the idea that, hey, if our starters get through 4 innings the first or second time through the rotation, we'll be okay. We'll be able to handle it. We've got a couple of multi-inning pitchers. Everything will work out okay. And the last thing about that is that the Rangers don't need to push these guys. It's not how you start; it's how you finish. And I fear that there are going to be a number of pitching injuries this early in this year because guys have come back from the lockout and have ramped up a little bit faster than usual. And the number one thing that I think is important to me out of spring training this year is the fact that the Rangers have hit 24 home runs, or going into Tuesday they had hit 24 home runs, which was tied for the major league lead in spring training. Why is that important? Because spring training homers often are windblown and they don't mean anything in the grand scheme. Here's 2 reasons why. 1, 7 of those homers have come from new additions. This team needed more power in the lineup. The addition of Brad Miller as a left-handed hitter against right-handed pitching. He's already produced 3 home runs. He's got pop against right-handed pitching. That's a new addition. Corey Seager's got 2 home runs. Mitch Garver has a pair of home runs. So you've got 7 home runs from guys who are new additions, and I think that you're going to see a lineup that has more power in it, and hopefully with the Semien, Seager, Garver combination at the top of the order, you're going to have more opportunities for guys to hit on base, which may give them better looks at pitchers. The second reason that's really intriguing to me is 9 of these home runs, more than a third, have come from guys who are purely prospects. Guys like Josh Smith, Bubba Thompson, Davis Wenzel, Josh Stowers, Jonathan Ornelas, Ezekiel Duran. And these are all guys who are playing late in games against other minor leaguers for the most part. And in some cases, they've played against big leaguers. I mean, Josh Smith had a double off Garrett Crochet, which was perhaps the at-bat of the spring. But what I think it says to me right now is that the Rangers minor leaguers are better than most of the minor leaguers they're facing in these spring training games. And that goes and dovetails with where this club feels like it is in terms of being on the upswing, in terms of organizational depth. You know, this club is ranked number 9, according to Baseball America, in organizational talent. When we did our top 31 prospects for March, it was clear to me that there are a number of legitimate major league prospects in this organization. And so I think that this all kind of is being shown this spring with the hitting. Yeah, there's a lot of questions about the rotation at the big league level. This organization has always had questions about the rotation. I think there are a number of pitching prospects. Not all of them are going to hit, but I think the pitching prospects are in good shape. I think what we have seen is a year ago, you would have said that if anything, pitching in the organization was ahead of position players. And what I'm seeing now is it seems like the position player depth has caught up really, really well. So that's encouraging for the Rangers. And with that, our number one observation from spring training, I'm going to get on out of here. I'll be back in Arizona next week. Actually, I'll be evacuating the premises next week on the way back to Dallas, and I'll try and shove in a little end of spring report before we shuffle off to Toronto and the start of the season. Until next week, everybody, and when I hopefully have the spot in my head covered, so long.